Feels like we'll be there. Things to life.
You wouldn't know that the river is sick just by looking at it.
Fast forward to 2011, and this sick river is now the site of a $1 billion cleanup effort paid for by GE as part of a settlement with the Environmental Protection Agency. Key to the cleanup is a process called dredging to remove the PCBs from the river bottom.
If you know something of valuable information to help your fellow man, share that information so people can make a wise decision on whether they want to be exposed by living in this particular area.
Knowledge is life, and knowledge is power.
Can't beat General Electric, I tell you. For the benefits and the place to work, it was ideal. Sorry about the PCBs.
Rome, Georgia resides in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in the Ridge and Valley Province, a beautiful rolling forested landscape with an abundance of rivers and streams. The Etowah and Oostanaula Rivers come together in Rome and become the Coosa. The Coosa flows west over the Alabama border. Two of the largest polluters in the state of Georgia, Georgia Power's Plant Hammond and Inland Paperboard and Packaging, are right on the Coosa River, just outside Rome.
I'm going to Georgia, I'm going to Rome, I'm going to Georgia to make it my home. Gonna build me a cabin on the mountain so high, where the wild birds and the turtle doves can hear my sad cry.
Within the city of Rome, an abandoned GE transformer plant retains a skeleton crew that monitors water levels to prevent PCB runoff from the contaminated site. Adjoining this barren compound of metal, concrete, and barbed wire is a new public recreation site, GE Trails. General Electric contaminated the Coosa River in Rome, as they did the Hudson River in New York, but dredging of rivers in Georgia has not occurred. In the process of contaminating local waterways, GE also polluted residential and commercial properties. While GE invested almost $2 billion in the cleanup of the Hudson, they left Rome with a toxic legacy of PCBs that will remain, as one local citizen noted, to kingdom come.
I'm troubled, I'm troubled, I'm troubled in mind. If trouble don't kill me, I'll live a long time.
All of our wildlife depends upon clean water for existence.
Between 1946 and 1976, General Electric dumped millions of pounds of PCBs into the Hudson River.
Governor Reagan, in regard to property rights, where do you feel a property owner's rights end and the public welfare's begins?
Well, I think in all of our approach to ordinances, to local planning and so forth, we've recognized the kind of traditional concept that your use of your property must be such that it does not infringe on someone else's rights.
When I graduated high school from East Rome High, I decided to take some time off before college, and so I went to work at the GE plant. I worked in the final finish department where all these things are put together. So of course the PCBs were a component of a proprietary liquid, a formula formulated by GE called pyranol. And pyranol was a liquid that went into the cooling systems of the medium transformers that were being built at GE.
GE has developed an oil that fits transformer requirements to a T. Unless you're a chemist, the story of pyranol may sound like something out of Buck Rogers.
GE used PCBs, synthetic chlorinated compounds, known by the trade name pyranol, in transformers from 1953 until 1977. These PCBs remain in the local landscape over 4 decades after the federal government banned the chemical and GE stopped using it at its Rome plant. PCBs were dumped in such quantities that they left the facility and washed into streams like Little Dry Creek and Horse Lake Creek that course through Rome's neighborhoods and onto the Coosa River. The long-lived chemicals contaminated properties throughout the city and now lie in the river bottom sediment and accumulate in the aquatic food chain.
We're seeing some of the new approaches to learning, the experiments in education that are helping our youngsters add to their knowledge. But all the seeking and experimenting isn't confined to the classroom. The search, the enduring struggle to add to man's knowledge and help us to understand our world better goes on day after day in companies like General Electric.
I got your letter this morning, how do you think it read? Said, hurry, hurry, the woman you love is dead. Got your letter this morning, how in the world do you think it read? Said, hurry, hurry, the woman you love is dead.
Have you heard that they knew? There's documents that show that GE actually did know about the negative health impacts of this thing back in like the 50s.
Yes. But there are studies that show that it was probably causational.
How early on do you think?
The stuff I was reading was like from the early 50s, late 40s, early 50s. That some of their scientists started to see some health effects from working with PCBs.
When I got there, she was lying on a cooling board.
Polydent, Fixodent, false teeth in glasses, pacemakers, golf carts, and porches with swings. These are few of my favorite things. When the pipes leak, when the bones creak, when the knees go bad. I simply remember my favorite things and then I don't feel so bad. Back pains, confused brain, and no fear of sinning. No chance of it. I simply remember the great life I've had, and then I don't feel so bad.
She went to work at GE in 1954, and so I decided she's working there. It's a good place to work. I still say that.
Yeah.
Even though it had PCB, but I went to work there in 1955. And then, hey, you can't beat it. You can't beat General Electric, I tell you. For the benefits and the place to work, it was ideal. Sorry about the PCBs.
No, you don't have to apologize for anything.
No.
We're not.
You were working.
Okay, so my early childhood memories are from the West Rome area. My grandmother had a home on Woodbine Avenue, which runs parallel to a drainage that comes off of the GE property. And as a kid, we played in her backyard. She had a nice creek back there, and we were stomping and building dams in the creek and skipping rocks. And during some of those playtimes, we would find thick globs of oil or a black oily substance. We had no idea what it was. It turns out that the Beverly Hillbillies show was popular on television right at that time. And if you remember the intro for that show, it had the black goo bubbling up, the black gold.
And up through the ground come a bubbling crude oil, that is black gold, Texas tea.
Again, without any idea of what would later turn out to be some not so good material in the creek.
Beginning in the early 1950s, a generation after fighting Yankee invaders during the Civil War, Rome and Floyd County welcomed a modern northern invasion with open arms. 100 GE workers from Pittsfield, Massachusetts, arrived along with $25 million in investments to build a medium transformer plant and the promise of some 1,700 jobs. Enough jobs to employ a man or woman from one of every 10 households in Floyd County at the time.
Did he talk about, like, if he liked the work?
I can't say he enjoyed the work, but it offered him a good life. We were able to take vacations every year. My mom could stay at home with the kids every year. So he liked the money, but maybe not particularly the job. This is a photo of the house in 1980. This is the house I grew up in. I was born in 78, so he was a photographer too, so there's not that many photos of him. He's always behind the camera.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And this is an early picture that my mom would probably kill me for, of the family. Let's see. There's a much better picture of my mother. That's the way I remember her. And this is just some pictures of pool parties. We used to have pool parties all the time. So.
Okay, and that was in your backyard. Those are
good. That's when I think of my childhood, I think of that.
Well, every time they gave the union a raise, they had to give us one.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid we'd form a union, I think.
They're afraid they'd go union now. They didn't like it. Union really run it, but it didn't run the business, but we run the plant.
Was he a union member?
Mm-hmm, he was. Yeah. And he only had, his education went up to high school. So I'm pretty sure that he probably made better there than he could have made anywhere else, so.
For this community nestled in northwest Georgia, GE's arrival was a boon. Locals, who had long labored on farms or in area textile mills, jumped ship to work for the northern multinational conglomerate. From 1954 to 1997, GE provided jobs while the region's textile industry faltered.
So it was the people that came down to start the plant were Yankees.
Well, all of them.
Most of them were.
Just about 90%.
Well, some of them.
Well, that's Cole from Massachusetts. That's where the big power plant was for GE up there.
Pittsburgh.
And the guys they didn't like.
Oh, Robert, you don't know that. That's true.
Yes, I do.
You don't.
I've had talked to them. I know.
So they told you, they shipped us out?
We don't want GE suing you.
They want to ship me out, but
no. A contractor built all those houses out in Garden Lakes for the people that were coming in.
Out there.
People that were coming in.
It was. They're about dead and gone now, but there was a lot of them. Are you a Yankee?
That was Act 1 of The Fenton Touch, starring Jack Benny. Now for special news about General Electric's new 1958 filter flow washer.
This is the wonderful filter flow washing system introduced and perfected by General Electric to give clean, bright washes with no lint fuzz. Everything clean and sparkling with no lint fuzz. See this big capacity 1958 General Electric filter flow washer and matching dryer at your General Electric dealers.
One of my bosses, he had just been married 2 months. And I said, well, you find a place for y'all? He said, no. Said, my wife's parents wouldn't let her come over. And I said, why? He said, well, we're going to be living in the South. And said, we heard about all those Tobacco Road people. Barefooted and everything. Yeah. Like, they had heard about the South.
And worse and worse. But you think the Lessons would leave it? No, sir. They stayed on and on. But all that they had and all that they were, that's all gone with the wind and the dust.
I told him, I said, we have to educate you boys. We're just like y'all. But,
well, we'd mock them, use guys, in that old.
It wasn't fun, though.
In their sport, he'd always call it sport.
Well, one of them called me Dingbat. I don't know if you watch Archie Bunker and that show. He called me Dingbat. My name's Edith, and of course her name was Edith. So I just called him Meathead.
Archie, ain't we lucky that we're here to see our little girl getting married? Where is the little girl I
Jay's the dingbat on the roof.
Because when the people come down here from north, you're eating fruit, banana sandwiches, and tomato sandwiches, and pineapple sandwiches.
They wouldn't go back north.
No,
They like this southern stuff.
Yeah.
Do you think Jimmy is roaming around the White House tonight trying to find a meatloaf to warm himself up on?
I don't think the cod is eating meatloaf.
Who the hell are they? They're only from Georgia.
No, right there in that plant where I worked, I was in like one big department here, then another department, then I was in the one next to the wall, and it'd get up by 105 to 110 in there.
He'd come out of the, that's what I used to say. I said, I knew who sweated to build those things out there. Because he'd come out and he'd be wet down to his waist. They had big old fans and everything.
Well,
you just couldn't go to a place
blood
like that.
pressure problem the whole time I worked there. It's pretty normal now.
See?
Work, job activates, you know, something.
This whole thing with the energy and everything, this is all a conspiracy. You know that is a conspiracy there. Listen, for years, all our lives, they've been telling us to go out and buy stuff that use energy. You know, all electrical stuff. They got electric toasters, electric ovens, electric stove, electric stereo, electric TV, electric race, electric hair blower, electric knives, electric every damn thing. Not to mention the cars. And now, after all the big corporations there make the billions and billions of dollars worth of profits, signals, wham, they're changed. And after telling us for years that we can't live without this junk, now they tell us that we gotta live without it.
In a nation that was proud of hard work, strong families, close-knit communities, and our faith in God, too many of us now tend to worship self-indulgence and consumption. Human identity is no longer defined by what one does, but by what one owns. But we've discovered that owning things and consuming things does not satisfy our longing for meaning.
From the mountain stream over my body till I'm clean.
Three rivers in downtown Rome are really the only reason that Rome exists. They served as the interstate, back in the day before President Eisenhower had them built, and they bypassed Rome. It made Rome a commercial and cultural hub in the region for a long time. What we're seeing now very recently is there's kind of a secondary attraction for those waterways. You can hardly drive over any of the bridges downtown without seeing people on a paddleboard or in a kayak enjoying our waterways. So what that means for industry is we live in a city that has 3 colleges. The city and the county are recognizing the waterways as an asset. The rivers are becoming part of that quality of life in the community that will help keep young talent in the city that will fill the positions at these industries.
It's a difficult fight because when you're fighting GE, it's like fighting another country. They have more lawyers, they have more scientists, they have more resources, certainly than a small nonprofit organization like CRBI has, and even more resources than the state and federal environmental regulators have. So we're at a competitive disadvantage trying to get what we feel is the best cleanup in place. And what we found is that GE kind of dictated what they were going to clean up, how they were going to clean it up, to what extent they were going to clean it up, and in a lot of ways the state Environmental Protection Division just kind of rubber stamped GE's plans. CRBI stands for the Coosa River Basin Initiative. We're the upper Coosa Riverkeeper in charge of taking care of about a 5,000 square mile river basin that stretches from southern Tennessee down into north metro Atlanta, over into Polk County, and all the way over into Weiss Lake in Alabama. When all this was going down, this was back in 2002, 2003, GE was sending out these slick, glossy newsletters to like all residents here in Rome. They would send out like 30,000 newsletters to every home in Rome. And it was all this stuff about what a great job GE was doing cleaning up the PCBs, and how PCBs weren't really harmful anyway. And, you know, it was just a big PR thing for GE. And so we got a grant. We got a grant from the Ben & Jerry's Foundation to create our own newsletter and send it out to virtually everybody in Floyd County. I can't remember how many we did. It was well over 10,000 copies of this. And basically this was all done to kind of refute what the propaganda that GE was putting out there.
My area specialty is bioelectrochemistry. So my interest is in kind of interface between chemistry and biology. So I teach all the chemistries. Chemistry is awesome because everything works based on chemistry. PCBs are polychlorinated biphenyl groups. And so you start with a biphenyl, which is 2 conjugated rings of carbons, 2 6-member rings, that then you can multi-chlorinate. They're not flammable, they're not volatile, and they don't conduct electricity. So if you're familiar with how a transformer works, right, you're trying to take high voltage electricity to lower voltages. So you have to run it through the series of transformers, which generates a lot of heat. And so it sucks up all the heat without bursting into flames.
Where all these final components came in, the machines were filled with pyranol, and then they went next to the testing department, where they were oftentimes intensely overheated just to see what the effects would be. But they would heat them to the point of combustion where they catch on fire. And unfortunately, as it turns out, some seriously toxic chemicals are generated from that combustion process, dioxin being one of them.
All companies, so like Monsanto, was using them originally to make these compounds for transformers. So GE happened to be a company that builds transformers, so they don't make PCBs, they used PCBs in the production of their transformers.
I work around the PCBs. If they fail tests and bring them back, we have to tear them completely down. So, but we had gloves and stuff like that, you know. No, I didn't wear a mask or anything, but I try to not inhale.
I didn't like it and didn't inhale
that stuff. But I know a lot of guys that did. I think they're dead and gone counts the PCBs, just to be honest with you.
Can't blame it on that though, you don't know.
Theoretically, no one except for the employees should be using them. How much GE did to protect their employees, a little unclear. And then how much GE told others about leaks or spills. Seems pretty clear they didn't tell anybody until they had to.
Of course, the problem was they were disposed of in a number of ways. They were brought onto the property. This pyranol mix or PCB mix was brought onto the property in rail tanker car. Many times those rail cars petcocks were opened on them just to complete a final draining, and that material would drain out onto the ground.
His communities dumped their waste matter, their sewage, into the streams for easy disposal, thus creating the serious problem of pollution.
Between 1952 and 1969, the Rome GE plant sold pyranol to employees in 50-gallon drums for use in their homes as a pesticide, herbicide, and dust suppressant. Untold numbers of Romans also used PCB contaminated sludge from the city's sewer treatment plant as fertilizer for their lawns and gardens from 1967 to 1972.
Waste pyranol was put into 55-gallon drums and sold very low cost, 50 cents a barrel to GE employees so that they could use it and apply the chemical around their houses as a insecticide.
Why is it that you tried not to inhale it?
I knew a boy that he worked in maintenance department, And ever so often, I don't know, scrap it, they call it, the PCB oil, and he went and got 5 gallons of it. It's ideal for killing grass. It killed grass forever, and then he was gonna spray it up on his house for like termites, and so he made all his hair come out. Yep, that stuff is potent.
Is he dead by now? Don't we get him in trouble?
I don't know. Yeah, no, I don't. I think he is. About everybody I knew's about gone.
Well, I tell you that.
I'm hanging on.
Wow.
He told me that he built transformers, but I was very young and he had to explain to me that it wasn't the toy transformers, that it had to do with energy. So he did come home with a chemical, and it was to kill termites, and they put it around the house, and my mother was like, they did that to just about every house in Garden Lakes. It was very common practice at the time.
And they would not only put it around the foundation of the house, but also under the house. It was used because it's an oily substance and doesn't evaporate. It was used to spray on dirt roads to keep the dust down on unpaved roads. It made its way into the storm drainage system and ended up in the wastewater treatment plant, where it became a part of the sludge, which when dried out was given away to area gardeners and farmers and migrated that way. And of course, one of the biggest problems with the PCB molecule is that it does not break down naturally.
Though never substantiated by GE's health studies of its own workers, anecdotal accounts of former workers indicate an inordinate number of illnesses linked to the PCBs among Rome workers and their families. Today, in 2018, state health experts still recommend limiting consumption of fish caught in the Coosa River and other area streams because of high PCB levels in local fish.
As a retired radiation oncologist, I had treated a number of cancer patients over the years from General Electric. One of their first questions they asked me, did PCB exposure at work cause my cancer? From my experience, a number of their tumors were very aggressive. Stage 4 lymphomas, tumors of unusual sites such as adrenal gland, melanomas of the skin, soft tissue sarcomas involving the head and neck and central nervous system.
She wouldn't say like what specific chemicals, but she would say they just use really harsh chemicals. I don't want it in our laundry. And she was like, I really wish we had a separate washer and dryer for his clothes. And you know, he said stuff too. He didn't say PCPs, he just said chemicals, and he said that they had things that would grow 3-eyed fish.
I must say that in my day, we didn't talk that way to our elders.
Well, this is my day, and we do, sir. All right, lead tonight.
Wait a minute. 1, 2, 3.
Homer worked in the nuclear plant, so he would kind of make the correlation between working at GE and like the Simpsons nuclear plant.
We saw fish advisories come out for the Coosa River. The state EPD came in and said that it's only safe to eat so many fish so many meals of fish per week or per month. And actually you should not eat absolutely any of certain types of fish, the bottom dwellers and the top predators like catfish. I mean, I grew up with my grandfather taking me to fish at Lock and Dam, and we're coming into spring now. It won't be too many more weeks when the lock and the banks around the lock will be lined with people catching the white bass from it as they come up and down the river. So subsistence fishing is a large, if not unrecognized, important part of what goes on in that river.
So you also see not just the big fish with lots of PCBs, but your other predators like your blue heron, your osprey. Those animals that feed on the fish also can have high levels of PCBs. And it's not really a problem for, you know, the vast majority of the population, because we don't eat fish from the Coosa River on a regular basis.
That's a question, actually.
Yes, go ahead.
If, like, there's been a recent flood event or something and all that sediment gets kicked up and the river's really browned out, I kayak a lot and I go over to Lock and Dam and, like, play in the rapids. Do you think if that, and I do get water in my mouth, which I don't usually care about because, like you say, it's in the soil, if it has been kicked up,
I mean, again, you're such a large organism on the scale of things, you're going to be fine. Yeah, it's going to be such trace amounts that you're going to be able to, pee that out in a matter of days.
Yeah.
If you were a smaller organism, I'd be more concerned, like a smaller human, if they were drinking a lot of the water.
Yeah.
And then it's fat soluble, so it's probably in mother's milk. If mom is...
Right. If mom is eating a heavy diet of local fish, then that could be another way of transmitting it to a smaller person.
And this is honest to God truth. We got a letter from this farmer. The truck that he was driving, taking a transformer to the location, the transformer started leaking, so he pulled it over to the side of the road, and it was next to the farm. This is not going easy.
Oh.
But anyway, and pulled it next to the farm. And so GE got a letter from them stating that the farmer was suing GE because of the Pyranol that leaked down on it, because it leaked on his ground, got up on his fields, and his cows wouldn't eat. They wouldn't give any milk, and his wife was selling the milk, and she got mad and wouldn't have sex with him because of and that's the truth.
It is also necessary for commercial fishing.
During the life of the plant, GE employed more than 5,000 people, all of whom could have potentially taken Pyranol home. But since GE's PCB Rome cleanup began in the early 2000s, they have tested soils at less than 50 homes.
This alignment of information and waste permitting requirements all came together at the same time that I had a physical geology class composed to a large degree of non-traditional students, many of which had personal histories with the GE plant, either relatives who had worked there, family members who had strange illnesses, autoimmune disorders, or cancers, or there was a extreme interest about this. And we also happened to be in a section of that course involving streams and groundwater. So my students came to me. They'd been reading the articles and they said, "What does all this mean?" And I said, "Well, I'm not sure what all this means."
I was taking a microbiology class at Floyd Junior College. Our instructor asked us to, she gave us specimen tubes, and she asked us to go, around our neighborhood, our home, and get water samples. And she asked us to wait until it rained, pick different spots, and there's a ditch, a pretty large ditch beside our home. We got it at the back of our backyard and then the side of our yard. When I took it back to the school, we had the microscope, and she gave us some slides and just pour our sample on the slides and everything. And she said, "Does anybody see anything? Does anybody see anything?" Nobody saw anything. When I looked, I saw, it looked like a bicycle tire. That's the best way for me to explain it. Round with these spokes. Mm-hmm. And there was several of them, some large, some small. So she came over and she looked, and she couldn't believe it. The first thing she asked me is, "Where do you live?" And she asked me to sign a release. She said, "Would you sign this over to the school?" And I said, I had no idea. So I said, "Sure." A month later,
we saw these people in the neighborhood at that ditch digging, and they was on both sides of the road. First they dug on our side.
I know we were looking for possible poisons in the environment. That's what the whole project was about, but they never told me what it was.
They never said what it was.
Okay.
The ditch that we got the samples from were actually coming from the plant right beside our neighbor's yard. Well, it was a pipe coming from the other side of the plant because it was a railroad track behind our yard. So it was actually a pipe leading to the ditch coming behind the neighborhood.
West Central Elementary School is between us and GE.
I've been working for Rome City Schools for, well, this is 12 years. You know, these areas flood pretty readily. If things are going to wash through that mud and it's going to end up in the playgrounds, you know, that always was in the back of my mind, and it kind of still is. I mean, even this one, I'm sitting here right now looking at this playground. I walked across that muddy field and I'm thinking to myself, you know, I mean, how much of that is contaminated? Why wouldn't it be contaminated if it hasn't been removed? So, my relationship with this property started before I started working for the school system. I was taking classes at Floyd College, which is now Georgia Highlands, and Dr. Billy Morris was teaching geology. He was pretty impactful on my understanding of geology. It really kind of put me in an understanding of my place in the world. It was a nice experience. Finding your place in the world is a really nice thing to have, and historical geology did that for me.
I believe that geology has applications in everyone's life on a daily basis, and of course that's what I try to bring to life for some of my students.
And during this historical geology class, part of his extra credit was to attend this town hall meeting for CAN, Citizens Action Network.
We talked about it for a week or so, and we decided that we would basically abandon the agenda for the rest of the semester and just focus completely on this.
You know, he was using the word PCB. I'd never heard it before. Used the word pyranol. You know, it sounded kind of flammable.
So the students were off for that. We began to do some mapping of the area. We learned about some of the drainage patterns near and around the GE plant, on the fate of the molecule as it moves through physical and biological systems. With GE located right here, we wanted to know what are the streams doing around the GE property. And as you trace them, you see what develops is what I call a radial drainage pattern, in that all the streams drain away from a central point, which is extremely unfortunate when that central point is producing contamination. We came to the public hearing meeting about 20 strong, armed with pamphlets, and we asked a lot of hard questions.
With regards to cleanup, they will talk, they will meet, they will do everything, but they are not going to set a precedent in any community in this country of actually going in and doing what actually needs to be done. Because if they do it one place, they might have to do it every place.
GE was not prepared. They didn't know that we were coming. I'm sure that they assumed this would be a requisite meeting that would come and go quickly and they would get their permit and move on. But it turned out to be anything but that. The students became quite engaged.
I could tell that the atmosphere of the meeting was a little edgy, I guess, and I'm not one to not jump in the middle of it, so I asked them a question specifically about the chemical, and at that point I was addressed by the operations manager pretty directly at the time, and so it kind of set a fire under me, and I wanted to be involved. And
we walked the neighborhoods, knocked on doors, asked people questions, gave out information. A whole series of public meetings derived out of this. EPD got involved, EPA got involved. A local community organization, Citizens Action Network, CAN, was developed.
There was an editorial run in the paper about how great it was that GE was cleaning up the mess. And my response in reading that was, wait a minute, what mess? What are you talking about? And so I did a little bit of research and realized the extent to which Little Dry Creek had been filled with these chemicals, with PCBs, and that GE was in the process of very slowly and very quietly trying to clean it up with as little community involved or knowing what was going on. So I wrote a letter to the editor in response to their editorial saying, this is not something that the company deserves to be pat on the back for. This is something we need a lot more information about, and let's not just sit quietly by and let this happen. And in response to that article, I got a call from Billy Morris, who is a professor of geology at Georgia Highlands. I didn't know him at all. And that's where it started. There were 3 or 4 of us that got together in a geology room on Georgia Highlands campus and started talking about, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good. It feels like we've got a lot of questions about what's going on and we'd like some answers.
My involvement with Citizen Action Network was probably one of the best experiences I had, just because it kind of got me an understanding of what was going on in Rome at the time, as far as what we can do as a group.
As we grew, both in numbers in the community, but also in threat to GE, and it was a big threat. We were a very small group, and in this grand scheme of GE's profits and, you know, all of that, tiny, minuscule. But what we were threatening to do was push the EPA to make Rome a Superfund site, and that would have changed everything.
This international agreement would restrict the use of 12 dangerous chemicals, POPs as they are known, or the dirty dozen. First, concerns over the hazards of PCBs, DDT, and the other toxic chemicals covered by the agreement are based on solid scientific information. These pollutants are linked to developmental defects, cancer, and other grave problems in humans and animals. The risks are great and the need for action is clear. We must work to eliminate, or at least to severely restrict, the release of these toxins without delay.
So this is their annual company-wide shareholders meeting, just happens to be in Atlanta. And we go down there and we're marching around doing our bit, and there's some other protesters, but it's very corporate. People are going in, you know, suits and all of that. And this woman comes up to me and says, "Are you Jessica Lindbergh?" Never seen her before in my life. And I say, "Yes." And she says, "I'm from New York, and my group is also concerned with the same thing that you are. And one of us is actually a shareholder, so we have the right to enter the meeting. Would you like to take her ticket and go into the meeting? We would like for you to confront Jack Welch." Turns out her group is a group of nuns. They are nuns who live in New York, and one of them is a shareholder.
The last 20 years of the 40 years that we've been working on social issues within companies. Some of the larger companies, General Electric, Ford, General Motors, a number of the large consumer companies like Walmart. We've really seen, especially over the last couple of decades, some really critical changes in their attention to the supply chain and human rights, as well as their attentiveness to environmental concerns.
So I go in, and there is Jack Welch. I mean, he is not only the GE CEO, but he is an inspiration for hundreds and thousands of people who are, you know, businessman wannabes for the way he has run this company.
We haven't proven PCBs even harm anyone.
Now, Jack, you don't believe that. You believe they do harm people.
No, I don't believe that, but I'm not arguing that case.
I know you're not, but I have a hard time accepting that you don't believe by now that PCBs are harmful. There have been plenty of studies.
No, and none of them have proven it.
And I say, "Hello, my name's Jessica Lindbergh, I'm from Rome, Georgia." And he looks up and he kind of freezes. This is the first time he's paid attention really to anything going on. And he kind of stops. And I say, "I'd like to know if you will come to Rome and clean up the mess that you left there, because we'd like to have a safer place for our kids to play." And the room erupts in applause, and people just start, like, these are the GE shareholders, and the response that they give was so supportive of me, and I completely didn't expect it, but also indicated, I think, that the shareholders themselves wanted that question answered.
How long did it take the tobacco industry to agree smoking was dangerous to one's health? In our case, General Electric brought their own experts into Rome and said there is no more risk to cancer with PCBs as compared to the general population's risk to cancer.
It was around a lot of houses in Garden Lakes, and it was just what they did. And then she was like, it's probably not the best thing. She was like, retrospect, it's probably not a good idea. She's like, it kills termites, yes, but what else does it do?
What prompted her to talk to you about that?
I'm not sure. She did have a lot of health ailments before she passed away, so it might have come up with that. She suffered a brain aneurysm. I forget how old I was, but she was fairly young at the time.
When I did understand what the PCBs caused, the health issues, and then I started looking back at my health issues, you know, I read about how it affects the thyroid, and I eventually had to have my thyroid removed.
She suffered from several brain aneurysms, I would say, within a series of like 8 years. There were 2 other ladies. They also had brain aneurysms on our street, which was a very short street. Kind of weird, I thought, for such, and they were young too. So, such a horrible thing to happen to someone so young. And he was afraid that she was going to die. Like, he was too worried about that, I think, to be mad at anything else. For the year before he passed of a heart attack, there was a lot of coughing, a lot of blood. So he was never really diagnosed with anything. He never really went to the doctor either. So I wish I could have this conversation now with my parents. I'm so curious because I was so young when it was going on. I would like for them to talk to me as an adult about it now, I guess. Because I never got that perspective.
Yeah.
Hard time here, everywhere you go. Times are harder, never been before.
Goal for CAN was to have landfill A, which is where the railroad tanker cars, the greatest concentration of waste materials, to have landfill A dug up, hauled off, and burned. That's really the only way to get rid of the PCB molecule in contaminated dirt, is to incinerate it at a high temperature. Of course, that was met with strong resistance from GE, and by this time they had quite a bank of lawyers who were opposing all of this, and they were negotiating, of course, directly with EPD, because EPD is a regulatory agency. So EPD's got a couple of lawyers statewide to handle all the environmental problems that are in the state, and GE's got a double handful of lawyers just focused on this issue.
We don't know where it went. It could have been anywhere, but we do know that it was primarily GE employees that took it home and used it around their homes. And GE knows who worked for them. They know where those people lived. They've got all those records. And so what we tried to push them to do was to do a comprehensive study and determine if there are any of these houses where GE employees lived that still have PCBs around them. The very person from EPD that I had talked to the week before, who had told me that the residential testing program was not adequate, they knew it was not adequate, but it was the best that they could get GE to do, stood up before our city commission and told our city commission that the residential testing program was, and I quote, the shining star of EPD's work here in Rome. And at that point, we realized that we were fighting a losing battle, because GE was dictating what was going to take place.
It's a media of belief, a media of belief. The whole media is controlled by a few corporations, thanks to deregulation by the FCC. Give me Disney
Fox, Westinghouse, and good old GE?
They own networks from CBS to CNBC.
They can use them to say whatever they please and put down the opinions of anyone who disagrees.
This is NBC Television.
NBC blocks this Saturday Night Live cartoon, Conspiracy Theory Rock, rather than earn money through its broadcast. NBC's historical relationship with GE explains their motivation. NBC ranks as the oldest broadcast network in the USA, founded in 1926 under the parent company, GE. In 1930, the U.S. Justice Department forced GE to sell NBC because of antitrust charges. In 1986, GE reacquired control of NBC and held on to it until 2011, when Comcast bought them out.
Under the direction of the Georgia EPD and the urging of the CRBI, GE has spent an undisclosed amount, likely in the millions, to clean up PCBs since the closing of the Rome plant. They have built extensive groundwater treatment systems to protect local well water, removed contaminated soils from the creeks and city parks, and excavated soil from around the houses of former employees.
These neighborhoods, kids play in the woods, they play in the creeks. I live in Somerville Park, and that is a very popular park. The creek still flows through there. Mud's coming from the GE areas.
What are your thoughts on this new bike park?
I read in the paper where I think there was like $5,000 or something like that donated by GE to help out with the park. And like I said before, I don't know what all numbers were thrown around to remediate this situation, but apparently there was needed remediation.
You see, when I roll this car into the pits, they don't gas it up like other cars. They plug it in.
A progress report from General Electric. Subject, research on the electric car.
This particular car isn't going to win any races. It'll take 6 hours to charge it up again. So, electric cars still have a long way to go. But when they are ready for the road, GE will be ready for them. Night, fellas.
Progress for people from General Electric.
I've talked to some folks that have worked from GE, and they've at the closing, they knew without a doubt that there needed to be 100% remediation. Well, to my knowledge, I don't know if they've removed all this dirt out here in this bike trail.
Serious about our trail system here in Rome, Georgia.
I don't know if you're a mountain biker, but if you get on a mountain bike on a muddy trail and that stuff's slinging all over the place. Slinging on you, slinging on the folks behind you. So I don't necessarily want a bunch of Pyranol-soaked mud all over me, taken home to my kids and dog. Anyway, it's a good idea. I hope they've done what they're supposed to do. But, nobody's ever come out and said, yeah, we remediated the whole thing. It's just kind of been undisclosed.
Although the GE property is thoroughly contaminated with PCBs and requires regular monitoring, GE's facility manager claims that only one small section of the 123 donated acres required soil remediation, a drainage ditch on the southeast corner of the tract.
Applying technical knowledge to create new products. That's the role of engineers at General Electric. And it means progress in better living for all of us. The engineers make it possible for us to say week after week, at General Electric, progress is our most important product.
Like you said, it did a lot of good for the community.
Oh, it did. It did. It did a lot of. All of us. Everybody.
Just took all these old rednecks out of the farm, out of the fields, and put them in a bed up there. I call them rednecks,
Because he is one.
What are the arguments for and against it being declared a Superfund site? And why didn't it become an actual Superfund site?
When the word Superfund was said, we had people come to us as CAN who said, you're asking us to weigh economic development against public health. And we said, yes.
And we actually lived there from 1984 until 94. We were about to start a family, and we knew the house where we weren't going to be large enough, so we wanted to actually put additions onto it. And so when we contacted a real estate agent, she's a very well-known real estate agent in the area, and she was like, you guys don't really want to build onto this house because 10 years from now this area is going to look totally different, vacated. And she said it's probably going to be a lot of Hispanics moving in here. And so we were like, oh, okay.
Sure enough, both of those neighborhoods that were very nice, well-kept neighborhoods now, it's not what it used to be.
And she's right, there's a lot of Hispanics, because we go through there periodically, have moved in that area.
Did the real estate agent ever say anything about PCBs in the area?
Never.
No. Never.
But she knew that that area was going downhill.
Right, she knew it was going down fast.
And a lot of, like the people who had been there for years had moved out.
Right.
They left the area.
And she said that they're going to give you so-and-so's job and she's going to retire. So I was going to have to do both
That's
of them.
what they call golden handshake.
And I said bye-bye.
They want to get rid of you there. When I was 60 years old, I couldn't wait till I got 60. But I want to get out of that place, boy. It's pretty hard work.
Why did they pick up and go to Mexico?
Cheaper.
Cheaper everything.
Cheaper labor, everything down there.
Yeah, that boy.
And I'm sure they didn't let them unionize.
They said that the guys, but one or two guys that really went with it, they offered them guys a job to go with it, but they wouldn't go. Mm-hmm. But the ones that went, come back, said that they ain't gonna never learn it. And they didn't. They couldn't learn. It's complicated. There's some smart Mexicans there. There's some that I like.
I don't have anything against any of them.
Once an area is designated as a Superfund site, there are particular businesses, particularly food-related industries, that cannot locate within a radius of that particular site. So yes, it would, plus the stigma that comes along with the Superfund site, definitely it would impact economic development. And
so those are arguments against it sounds like. What would the argument for be?
Well, for would be for everyone to recognize it. Let's speak the truth to power. We've got bad chemicals here, and to keep our community healthy and clean, we need to identify where those contaminants are and either get them out or stay away from them. So in other areas, Superfund sites have been fenced off with concertina wire around them, or the materials have been dug up and removed. Now, unfortunately, there's no more money in the Superfund. It was depleted many years ago. There's no more EPA money left to clean things up.
In some ways, what they've done right now in leaving it alone is actually probably the most economically feasible and probably does the least damage for now until a better technique comes around to remediate what's left of the factory.
What else could they do for Rome?
There's enough property going unused in a building there, it could be turned into something productive, I'm sure. Now, whether it's a full-blown manufacturing facility, whether it's a solar array.
What else could you do with it?
I mean, not much, because you can't move the cement, right? The cement that everything's on, like it's best just to leave it alone. And you don't really want to put stores or anything in there.
I like the idea, though. Why couldn't you just cover that whole property with solar panels?
Sure.
Like a solar or a wind farm, something like that, where you're not doing any extra damage, but in that case, you at least get something back out of it.
Well, GE convinced EPD that the landfill should stay there. The community said, we want all the material in the landfill removed and hauled off to a proper landfill so that it won't be contaminating our community anymore. But GE said, no, we want to keep the landfill here, and so our community is stuck with a toxic waste site in the middle of our city forever and ever and ever and ever.
There was some fear there, and we didn't want to be fear-mongering, but yet, much like the bicycle trail signage, I would want to know. Some people didn't want to know because they felt that if they ever were to sell their property and they had knowledge that there was contamination on their property, then they would have to disclose that. We were getting phone calls from realtors. Do you know what you're doing to property values around here? You're killing us. Well, maybe it's not us that's killing you.
This is like his 25-year service recognition plaque. Never left the box, so maybe that's how proud he was. It's probably the first time it's left the box.
So there very well might be other things out there right now that some companies know are not great for humans, but we won't find out till later.
Obviously, GE should do the right thing and test all the households where their workers resided, and fully clean up the PCBs there and at their transformer plant. But the PCBs in the Coosa River pose a unique challenge. As we've seen in the Hudson River, if we dredge the Coosa, it will likely dislodge and stir up PCBs in the river bottom sediment and force them into the food chain and further downriver. So PCBs will likely be with us forever. But it's not all doom and gloom in the Coosa River Basin, as CRBI has no intention of going anywhere either.
Water flows from the mountain stream.
CRBI is committed to people enjoying our rivers, which means shining a light on problems and protecting habitat and drinking water. If you want a silver lining to this story, it may be that most of the PCBs that left the GE plant concentrated only in the Coosa River, west of Rome. And thanks to the work of Riverkeepers over the last few decades, our other two rivers, the Etowah and Oostanaula, boast some of the highest levels of biodiversity on the continent. This GE fiasco has awoken a sense of responsibility in our community. We now understand the need for vigilance and for community organizations like CRBI that work to educate and galvanize citizens around their most valuable and eternal resource, water.
When I shuffle off this mortal coil and my body turns to soil, I'll make a place for things to grow.
For men may come and men may go, but I go on forever. For General Electric, here is Ronald Reagan. Good evening. It's circus season all over America, and so tonight, once again, in answer to many requests, we present Henry Fonda in a return engagement as the star of Clown on the General Electric Theater.
He lost a finger to GE.
That's all I got out of GE.
You didn't get out with that?
No, I can't tell it's gone except when I go to pick my
The
dog.
day was there.
Up to form a cloudy sky. Water flows from the mountain stream over my body till I'm clean. Evaporates when the sun is warm. Then a cloudy sky is born. Like the rain falls to the ground, I will always be around. I will always be around. Every road you travel down, though every tear you shed may fall. fearful of this mortal coil.